Marriage is not a retirement home. Relationships are not retirement. But unfortunately, a lot of men see it that way. Actually, men and women, right? But I'm speaking more to men here. Relationships should not be seen as something like, I get into this with the girl that I really like, and, everything's great, honeymoon phase, and then things settle, and you kick your feet back, and you're like, oh, this is so much better than dating. We really care about each other. And then you just fall into a rhythm, and you think that this is it. And I know this is the case because I have eyes. I watch how people act in relationships. I also have experienced it myself and experienced it actively. I understand the urge and the drive to kick back and just go, everything's great. I just enjoy being with this person. I am also a professional who talks to men who are in relationships or help them get into relationships. And one of the biggest things that I see, unfortunately, and I fucking hate it because it's so stupid, is I'll have a client who is looking for a relationship and I help him get it, right? I do my job. As soon as he gets in the relationship, the dude falls off the fucking earth. It's such a common thing. And I try to warn guys. I'm like, look, once you get in the relationship, I'm not saying, we have to keep working together the entire time, but you do need to know how to set a foundation, right? And you need to know how to handle problems when they're going to arise, because you're going to have problems, right? I don't care how well you two mix, how compatible you are, how mature she is, how mature you are, right? And we're assuming that that's the case, right? We're assuming best case scenario, right? Having all those great things, it means that there's going to be less conflict, or when there is conflict, it's going to resolve a lot easier because you two have similar values, or you are open communicators, etc. But even in that case, even in the best case scenario, you're still going to have conflict. And if you don't know how to handle conflict in the correct way, it's going to lead to issues. And the things with relationships is, and this is why they're such a killer, unlike dating and seduction, when you're first, getting to know a girl, if a mistake is made and you lose her early on, it doesn't take a lot, right? Because you haven't built a foundation of attraction and a connection. So, one wrong text or a couple wrong texts, or, a few awkward moments, or, a lack of connection, and, she's not going to want to see you anymore, right? You see very immediate results in your errors. Relationships, because you have this foundation built up, there's a large buffer, right? And this is going to give the illusion that things are okay, even though they're not. There is an infection starting to spread. There is a problem with the foundation of the house, and you don't see it, but it's going to cause long-term problems. Then when the house fucking collapses, you're like, oh my God. Whenever you hear stories of both men and women, right? But again, I'm focusing on men here. If you hear a horror story from a man, oh, my wife cheated on me, or oh, this happened. Now, I'm not justifying cheating. I'm not justifying anything. But nothing comes out of fucking nowhere. It's impossible. Things do not just arise out of nowhere. There are always certain conditions from the environment that you and her created that eventually lead to either infidelity or someone leaving the other person. And these things creep up on you slowly. There might be, once they get inertia, they're really going to take off, and you're going to start seeing things get really bad. But there are always warning signs. And anyone who says otherwise is a fucking idiot, because they're not paying attention. They either lacked observational. Like if there's a man who's like, I don't know what happened, and she's just a nagging cunt, and, she left me. And it's like, well, bro, clearly the writing was on the fucking wall for a long time. Right? But everyone portrays stories with them as the good person and the other person as the bad person. Right? Anytime there's a bad relationship, they're both guilty. Maybe one person more than the other, but both parties are guilty. Even if the only biggest guilt of the one person was the fact that you dated that person, because clearly you should not be in a relationship with that person. I mean, red flags out the wazoo, right? But you were desperate, or she's hot, or, you know, you got addicted to pussy, or whatever, right? So you cannot see relationships as I'm just going to everything's cool now, I'm going to give up. No, they are work, right? Now, if that sounds horrible to you, okay, that's fine. Like, no one here is saying you have to get in a relationship. No one here is saying you're going to have to get into a marriage. And I'm not really going to even go into that. If someone wants to leave a comment like, oh, relationships and marriage aren't worth it, I don't give a flying fuck. Like, this is not the place to discuss that, right? We can do that in a different video. This is a place to describe someone who does want a relationship or does want marriage, which is most people. You're in the minority if you don't. You want to have a healthy relationship or a healthy marriage, but if you do not get rid of this wrong mentality, you're going to have a bad time. And I recently had an old client of mine who actually did help meet his wife, and he got back in touch with me. We had talked over the years, occasionally over email, to deal with, you know, little hiccups here and there, but he had now reached the point where he was considering a divorce. But there was a lot of complications, like the fact that his wife was pregnant now. And so, I was like, all right, we need to get on a call, dude. Like, this is heavy shit, right? And there's a lot of details, right, that I'm not going to go into. I mean, you don't know who he is, so I could make it a, fictional story in the sense that, like, you don't know who exactly I'm talking about. So I'm not afraid of, like, giving the details, but the main thing that is the point of this video, and also the solution that I gave to him, was, it kind of went like this. I'll give you the overview. So he had started to kind of lose his balls in the relationship, and everything was kind of cool up until he started making concessions, right? It started with his wife wanting to move to a different apartment, a more expensive one, and he knew it was a financially irresponsible decision, all things considered, but he gave into it because also his mother-in-law kind of pressured them. Then, not long after, she wanted to upgrade again, and they ended up buying a house. Another, considering their finances, a not really necessary and therefore not a responsible decision financially. But also, his wife was, she's kind of lazy. She's not really a self-starter. She's not going to be the one to kind of push to change things, whether it's like, working out and losing weight that she put on, or, dealing with things around the house, picking up her half of the chores in the house. She wasn't very financially responsible in general. So there's all these things, right? And they're really irritating him because my client is a bit of an independent kind of guy, right? Very fiercely independent. And so when he sees someone who doesn't have that level of autonomy, it pisses him off. But what's interesting is that wasn't necessarily, he was like focusing on that stuff, and he's like, I just want to be alone. I don't want to be with her, blah, blah, blah. But when I traced back, when the problem started, I was like, well, you never really voiced any of these concerns early on in the relationship. So clearly things can pile up, but I don't think they really bothered you that much, right? So I said, when did you really feel like things started to go off the rails? And rewinding the timeline, it was about when he started making these concessions, and he started, doing things he didn't want to do, essentially, right? So losing his balls. And when all things were considered, I was like, so really none of these issues that you're bringing up now were the problem. They just now seem like the cherry on top. What I think the core issue is that you don't want to do work anymore. Meaning he doesn't want to fight when she does bring up an idea that he disagrees with, or his mother-in-law, pressures them to make a decision, or, she's not doing stuff around the house, or this and this and this. And his argument was essentially, I'm tired of fighting over it, and I'm tired of arguing over it. And I said, well, you knew that she wasn't this kind of person, right? It was very evident early on. You knew a lot of, and this isn't the only thing, there's other things. But it's like, none of these things are surprises. And yet, they didn't really bother you that much. It didn't bother you that much until you started getting tired of leading the relationship, right? He started to see the marriage as a retirement, right? And he kind of, I would say, he kind of stumbled into the relationship, right? I think it was nice and it was comfortable. And, I mean, there were some good things about her that he liked. But looking back at all the details of the relationship, because I was there, he kind of just, like, found something nice and just went with it, right? And so if that's your mentality, if you're that kind of person who's just looking for something comfortable, and you don't want to be fighting, and you don't want to be fighting for, hey, you need to be doing that, like being a active CEO in the relationship. He doesn't want to play that role. He doesn't want to put in that work. He doesn't want to put in those hours. He just wants to chill and he wants to relax. If that's your mentality, you're going to have trouble in a relationship. Because you will never get to the point where you can just kick back and relax and there's no problems. You have to actively be the leader in the relationship, right? And I don't think people understand what that actually fucking means, right? When you talk about like dominant and submissive, and I think a lot of people have this like fantasy, especially people who like hate that you say that men be dominant, women be submissive. I think they have this it's the same fantasy that poor people have about CEOs. Like the kind of people who talk about like, oh, billionaires need to pay their share, even though, they'll pay more taxes in 1 year than you'll pay in like in 100 lifetimes, right? These people are just fucking stupid, right? They look at power and they're like, oh, you're just a king and you're just enjoying it. And it's like, no, that shit's a lot of work. Like it is a monstrous amount of work with a huge amount of stress, because the decisions that you make have long-term repercussions, because you are responsible for a lot of people, right? Especially if the person in power has like compassion and cares, like they have employees, they have like, if they fuck up, a lot of people suffer, right? On a smaller scale, but no less important of a scale, because it's your life, it's her life, and your children's life. You are the CEO of a relationship or a marriage. And if you have the idea that I just want to kick back and I don't want to work, you can have that sometimes, right? Because let me be very clear. There is an extreme where if you're dealing with a woman who is super high maintenance, I mean, you're just a fucking idiot for marrying someone like that, right? I mean, a lot of times, like, I don't understand what's even high maintenance, right? If she's like, needing constant fucking attention and is desperate for it, or she's needing constant reassurance because she has crazy levels of anxiety, or any extreme, that's on you for marrying that person, right? So there is a certain level of like, pick a good business partner, okay? But we're talking about just the like daily, weekly, monthly responsibility of someone who's going to be in charge. You have to be there to make daily decisions. You have to be there to make weekly decisions. It can be, who's going to clean, who's going to do that. Or if you're going to delegate her to be in charge of that, then like a good manager, you have to be on top of it, right? Let's say you don't like to clean, right? You think the woman should clean, right? Let's just be super traditional, or she should cook. And then she starts to, be derelict with her duties. You need to get on top of her, be like, hey, I noticed you haven't really been cleaning a lot. You haven't been really cooking a lot. Look, and of course you need to have like arguments for this, right? Look, I'm bringing home the income and da-da-da-da-da. I would appreciate if you, do your other half, right? Or if even she's working, but you like a traditional household, then you need to advocate for it and argue and negotiate for it, right? And if you do it correctly, she'll do it. And if you don't, okay, well, then you have to come to some sort of like, pay someone to clean the house, right? Like, don't just give up. And that's what my client kind of did. He was just kind of like throwing his hands in the air and like, oh my God, this is too much work and I don't want to like do this anymore. Look, you're stuck with the girlfriend or wife that you have, okay? And if this was like early on in the relationship, I would say, you know what, maybe this isn't the person for you, right? And you need to cut it before it gets bad. But I mean, she's pregnant with your child now. Like you're kind of locked in, right? And it's no one's fault but your own, right? And he knew that too. Like I'm not, this guy's not a deadbeat. Like he's a good guy, right? What I think was happening was he was just very stressed by a lot of things happening at once, and he had kind of fallen into this idea of marriage as a retirement, right? Oh, I just want things to no, right? And considering the person you married, you know, and her, you knew how her in-laws are, right? You have to understand these things, and you have to proceed, right? So a lot of your work, just like in a business, you're gonna have a lot less problems if you pick the right business partners, or you delegate duties to the right people, right? So if you establish, this is what I mean by when guys get into relationships, they kind of just like, they don't care about coaching anymore. They're like, oh, I'm good, I'm happy. It's like, no, you fucking retard. Like you need to prepare yourself because there are going to be problems, but they get stuck in the honeymoon phase, right? So you need to set up a relationship properly. A lot of these problems are just prevented by good preparation. But not everyone, knew these things. Not everyone had the guidance. And shit, even guys who are learning from me, I'm like, hey, man, like, make sure that when you get in a relationship, and then they go off into fucking, fairyland. And I was like, all right, okay, well, I did my best. I tried to warn you, right? You can only motivate people or teach people so much. People are going to do what they want to do at the end of the day. And so this client of mine kind of fell into that. And because we had talked kind of earlier in the relationship when he started dating her, and then things kind of, I didn't hear from him for a couple of years, right? So he kind of just started coasting. But that's when all of these things started to happen. And then they pile up to this moment where he's like sending me an email like, I want to divorce my wife. And I'm like, well, bro, let's hold on a second here and let's do some fucking management, right? And I kind of gave him this talk, right? I was very, even a little bit more harsh. Like to his face is like, you're kind of being a pussy. But he appreciated that, right? Because he was like, you know what? Yeah, it makes sense. Like I kind of did get lazy. I kind of did lose my role as like being in charge, right? And so when I talk about like men being dominant and being in charge, it's knowing how to, reignite a conversation and deal with conflict. When not conflict in the sense that you two are fighting, just like conflict of like your employees not doing their job. So you need to fucking remind them, right? And it's the little things here and there. Like, she responds to you in a little bit of a smart ass tone. You need to catch that shit now, because if you let people get away with it, they're just going to get, not out of malice, but they're just going to get in a bad habit, right? So insubordination, people just not doing their, her not doing her job, but also being hard on yourself too. You not doing your job. Right? Whether it's, making enough money, whether it's, taking care of things that, tags on your car, making sure that, taxes are going to be paid. You make it like all of these little duties, right? That I'm not saying women can't do these duties, okay? But what's interesting is that once men get in a relationship with women, for the most part, unless she's a hyper-masculine woman, and there are women out there who are like that, women tend to kind of want to just, the man's going to take care of everything. And the more dominant you are, usually the more of a submissive of a woman you're gonna attract, right? And she's going to kind of just want to, kick back and enjoy it too. Like I said, it's not just men who have this mentality. Women are going to be drawn by this desire to just like enjoy the relationship, right? But if you don't keep all of the moving parts lubed and oiled, it will start to rust in so many different ways. You both start gaining weight because you aren't like, on top of things, right? That's very common. I've run into that issue, or you two stop seducing each other and being romantic and being sexy, right? And really like keeping that flirtatious energy with each other, which can cause you to fall out of love with each other, because love in a relationship is an active thing. Duties around the house, right? You start to let things go. Duties with financial duties, or happiness duties too, right? Like, are you making sure your wife is happy? Are you making sure that she's she's doing a hobby that'll make her happy? Are you making sure that she has a long-term project in mind that is going to bring her fulfillment and enjoyment? Are you continuing to do your hobbies? Are you continuing to chase some long-term goal, which is something that I also talked to this guy about? I was like, look, man, you're complaining that you're losing your life, but like you're not taking action. Like, he's like, yeah, I like to go fishing. Then go fucking do it. Like, you're acting like you're a slave, right? You're just kind of accepting your shitty situation. Just go, right? Go do what you wanted to go do this. Go do this. Like, fucking get up and go, right? But you need to understand that all of it, on some level, is pretty much just, paying bills, metaphorically, and making sure you get your tags for the year on your car. Like, it's just the most basic maintenance shit, right? But it's financial stuff. It's taking care of, the house. It's taking care of yourselves. It's taking care of the relationship itself and your connection to each other, right? But it's all just a bunch of little, making sure boxes are checked and maintaining things, right? And the good part, and now that may sound like soul-sucking fucking awful, right? But the good part is, if you do these duties and you take care of the things that you own, right? If you take care of your car, that's a metaphor for like the whole relationship, the car will take care of you. The car is a very useful thing, right? It'll get you where you need to go. Same with the relationship. If you take care of the relationship and you have a proactive working maintenance mentality about it, the relationship will take care of you. It'll give you, fulfillment. It'll give you sex. It'll give you, love, and it'll give you support. It'll give you, when you're down, the other person is going to be there to lift you up, right? You have to take care of it, or it can't take care of you. And you can't take care of something when you see it as retirement. Retirement is death. Like, the more I start thinking about like even like actual retirement, like it sounds like death. I'm just going to sit around and do nothing, right? Now, I know a lot of people, that's not how they actually do retirement, right? But it's like, you got to do something. You have to have a hobby that you're working on. You have to have a long-term goal. You have to be working. You may not be working, but you got to be working. You got to be doing something, or you will decline, right? And I've seen it. I've seen it in old people before, where they just kind of lose everything and they just stop doing everything, and that's when they decline very fast, right? They have no more goals. They have nothing to work on, and they just, they're dead before they're dead. Same with a relationship. If you're not constantly working on the relationship, now you'd have to be like 24/7, like, what do I have to do? Right? But definitely probably more than you think. Treat it like a business, treat it like a car, whatever metaphor you want to fucking use. Check your oil, check your fluids, check your tires, take it out for a spin every once in a while to keep the engine warm and, everything going. You gotta take care of it. So every once in a while, do like a weekly checkup in your relationship or your marriage. Be like, okay, am I doing stuff to make me happy? Is she doing stuff to make her happy? Are we doing things together? You know, how's our sex life? How's our, you know, communication? Are we spending enough time together? Are we, you know, am I taking care of my duties? Is she taking care of her duties? And if not, how can I get myself back onto, you know, the shit, and how can I get her back onto the shit, right? Am I managing her emotions? Am I making sure that she's like, every week or every 2 weeks, you know, treat it like, have a day where you look over your relationship or your marriage and you're like, okay, this is what I need to change, because there is going to be always something to work on. You're never going to get to a point where you're like, okay, we don't have to do anything, especially if you have fucking kids, right? So yeah. Sorry, buddy. Relationships and marriages are not retirement. If you see it that way, you're cooked. All right, cool. Love you guys. Best of luck.